Hi, and welcome to LinkedIn for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Julia Zata, a LinkedIn strategist and ghostwriter, and lover of all things practical when it comes to visibility strategies. This podcast is for service-based business owners who want to build their brand on LinkedIn, attract new clients, collaborators, and speaking engagements without overthinking every post or sounding like a corporate robot. And yes, we're going to keep it actionable and fun. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest that I'm excited for you to get to know. Noelle Van is a leadership and change strategist, a speaker, and founder of Beyond, which is a platform helping high-achieving women rethink success and build what comes next beyond corporate life. After more than a decade advising in high-performance environments at Apple and Sony, Noelle now works with women navigating career pivots, entrepreneurship, and reinvention in today's rapidly changing world of work. Through her programs, speaking, and podcasts, The Change Effect, she explores the intersection of ambition, visibility, fulfillment, and personal evolution. Her work focuses on helping women move from external success to meaningful impact while creating businesses and lives that feel more aligned with who they are becoming. Welcome, Noelle. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Awesome. So I'd love to know what led you to this work. Like, it seems very impactful, and I'd love to know a little bit about the backstory.
Okay, well, so after years of working as an executive coach, many, many years, I was working with leaders in pretty high performing environments. I know you mentioned Apple and Sony, and had worked in the agency world prior to that. And in the years of working with leaders, especially on personal and professional change, I started to notice a pattern, especially in women who were very successful on paper, but were privately feeling kind of disconnected, exhausted, and really unsure of what environment was really going to be helping them thrive. So there was people that were kind of questioning where they were. And I was on the HR side of things, so I was managing that area and I was doing a lot of the executive coaching. So I was sort of seeing it from all sides in terms of people coming with, issues that would come up, but also really personal kind of reflection was happening a lot. And then when I moved out of the corporate environment, which was about 4 years ago, I started taking on clients because I started working as a leadership coach and taking on clients, all women. And most of the women that I was starting to work with were really at this space and time where they were making a transition out of their current role. And so I've been doing a lot of work around that, knowing that I left 4 years ago and had similar experience in terms of just questioning whether or not the environment I was in was for me and if there was something bigger waiting for me on the other side of it. So knowing that and having had that background, I really started to do more deep work with these women. And that's where I created Beyond, which is the program that I offer now, really to help women navigate change and kind of reclaim their voice and just design what success looks like on their own terms.
Awesome. And I can't wait to ask you more about Beyond. But before we get into that, I would like you to give my listeners some insights. Like, for example, what are some of the signs? Because the impression I'm getting is that women in this situation probably feel quite alone because they probably don't have a lot of people with whom to voice their doubts. Am
Yes.
I okay? So,
Absolutely.
what would be some of the telltale signs that somebody listening could say, "Oh, wait, that might be me"?
Gosh, there are many. So I would say some of the real telltale signs are, if you are looking at the work week on a Sunday evening and you're looking at that with dread or feeling that anxiety already coming upon you before you even step in the door, that's a sign. Now, that's a pretty obvious one, right? But there are very
Yeah.
subtle ones that can happen. And I think especially women in leadership, because they are performing on four cylinders all the time, and that's the expectation, there isn't that ability for them to really take pause and listen to their own intuition. And so what I often tell women that I work with is, when you're in an environment, let's say you're in a meeting environment or you're working through a project with coworkers, what are the kinds of things that come up that feel disconnected for you, right? So if you are especially working for an executive team, which a lot of the leaders that I work with have come from that background, right? Where they're either in the C-suite or they're working with executives within an organization. what are the kinds of things that you're starting to feel after you have these interactions? And often women will come to me because they don't quite understand why they feel so misaligned. It's like, I'm not really sure, this feels off. I don't feel like my values are in alignment with what's going on. And that's usually the early signs, right? Where there's
Mm,
kind of that little nudge inside of you saying, it's not, I always tell people it's not an earth shattering, oh my gosh, I've got to
right.
go create something completely new, because that's not what any of us necessarily do. We either decide we want to step towards something different, and then we really have to contemplate what that looks like for us. But those signs really come early on, internally more than externally. And so I always tell women to really just kind of listen to your own intuition when you are coming home from work. I used to have times where literally I would be coming home from work and feeling like I don't know how much longer I'm going to be
Mm,
able to continue. Now, that was my personal experience. Every woman is different, and some women may just be in the wrong role. It's not to say that women necessarily are all leaving the corporate world, but that's predominantly kind of the shifts that happen that will sort of cause them to make some decision to either start looking at what that's all about or start talking to other people. Now, the other thing that you just brought up, and this is something that's really important, that isolation. I know from experience, I know from clients that have worked with me, that they were really held back in the beginning, didn't necessarily want to voice how they felt because they're in a highly visible position, or they're in,
yes.
a situation where, they're the breadwinner, and for them to rock that boat, that's not necessarily the best idea, right? And as women, we want to take care of everyone else. So I always tell women, and this is whether I'm coaching them or not, find someone you can talk to, find a support system. And what's really interesting right now is, because this shift is happening, and I think we'll talk a little bit about the sort of movement that's been happening more recently, where there's more and more women doing this. So there's more and more women out there that need each other. And that's the basis of what I do in one of my programs, and bringing women together so that we can be supportive of one another. It's not just kind of an advisory engagement that I have with them where I can help guide them in certain ways, but how do we really get that inspiration and motivation from each other? And that's super,
Yeah.
super important, because to do it in a
Yes.
vacuum often delays it quite a bit, and also just doesn't help with your momentum.
Yes. And also having that like community support helps you realize, hey, I'm not alone. Hey, it takes a lot
Absolutely.
of the charge off of this decision or even just a discomfort. It helps to feel like, "Oh, okay, like we can work through this." So,
Yeah.
yeah, for
And
sure.
I do think that the power of women coming together, whether it's building a business or just literally going through a transition that's difficult, right? So there's different ends of the spectrum. Not everybody, like I said, is going to go out and do consulting or build their own business. I have women that come through this that are like, I just need to take a moment. And I need
Right.
to recognize that what I'm feeling is real. And oftentimes they're surrounded by women that are in different stages of that process too. So they can kind of see where they might be a few steps down the road, or may
Yeah.
have some insights and perspectives that they weren't even thinking about. Yeah.
Um, I wanted to get into this movement that you hinted at. You talked about this shift that's happening more and more. And I remember when we first met, you mentioned it and you told me you've heard of quiet quitting, right? And so this other movement has another name that I've forgotten about. But if you could refresh my memory and introduce our listeners to this
Yes.
concept.
So the quiet quitting is something that we've all been aware of in the past. And I think that came up around the pandemic, where we had people that were kind of still at their jobs, but maybe checking out a little bit or dissociating to some degree, for various different reasons. Obviously, the pandemic was a big deal for a lot of people, and it made shifts in people's ways of thinking about work in a pretty profound way. What
Yes.
I was and what I've been following for the past 2 years now, almost three, is what's called the quiet breakup. And this is something that you might have read about. Some people might have caught wind of this, but what essentially has been happening, over 450,000 women have left the workforce. Now, this is for various different reasons, right? There have been obviously women that probably have decided to leave. There might have been other changes within organizations that have caused that to happen. But that's a pretty significant number of women that have left. And now the numbers are probably much higher than that, but it's continuing to become this movement where high performing women, they're still showing up, they're still succeeding, but internally they're beginning to kind of detach from that identity and version of the success that they once chased. So this shows up in women leaving, like they say, quietly. Women are having conversations with their employers and discussing departure dates and doing that in a very sort of subtle way as they move into this next chapter. Now, some women might decide to retire at that point, depending on where they are. But what's really clear here is that women are looking for something else, and they are doing this in a very subtle way, but they're seeking something deeper. And so what I have found really compelling about this and in the work that I do is that we have women that are now kind of in a different phase, right? You think of like the early 90s when women were sort of, women are going to do it all, and you can have the kids and the career, and you can be successful in all areas of your life. And women, I think, became pretty exhausted by that. But what I see is not just that sort of exhaustion, but really an internal shift that's happening within women that is telling them that success can look a lot of different ways. And there's so many different possibilities out there. And so what happens is typically when we work together, we'll talk through what's the foundation? What have you built over the past 15 to 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years? And what comes to the surface is this breadth of work that they've done. And the discussion then becomes around how do you now repurpose this in a different way to actually find fulfillment and create something of your own. And that's what's really been compelling about this work for me and for the women that I work with, because it's this opening of a whole different construct. And we've had organizations that have been the background and the environment that most of us have grown up in, right? So the transition out of that is obviously going to be a significant one for anybody that wants to do it. So they're not only going through this identity shift, it's also this empowerment piece, but then it's also the new beginning. And how do you transition in the right way and give yourself that grace to take the moment and really think, like, what do I want? And
Right.
that's the cool part about this that I think, if I were to sum it up, is women are actually asking those really important questions of themselves.
I want
I
to highlight a couple of things that you said that I thought were really interesting. First of all, the fact that the desire for more meaningful work, which I imagine that somebody who is a high achiever and that gets chosen for these C-suite roles, which is a very small percentage of people within a company to begin with, like the whole reason that you become a high achiever is to have an impact. It's not just for the salary. So it's somebody who's highly motivated and they have to feel that their work is making a difference. And so it makes sense that after probably a long time within this role, they realize, okay, I need something different or something new or some type of transition, just because as a person, you need to have that meaning in the work that you're doing. And it's not necessarily always going to be within the same company, which I can imagine is a little bit challenging to take in because we were kind of brought up in this idea that you stay in a role forever, especially if it's a good one, right? You don't think about, oh,
absolutely.
I've put so many years in, I'm going to leave now, like, and start
Yes.
over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and what I think is so beautiful about what you just said, because it's that starting over piece that I always feel is so misunderstood. Because for women that are leaving, they are not starting over. They are extending their career out, and they are expanding, and they are increasing impact. And I have worked with women that are from very successful roles in very well-known organizations, and they will say to me, am I going to make money again? It's like, oh, wow. I mean, that is absolutely, if not more than what you're actually making now, but not from a monetary perspective. That's one thing. But from that impact and visibility and ability to create and serve at a different level is, I think, what women are craving. And so, yes, the income is a factor, but they've probably had a fairly steady income for most of their careers, right? So to me, it's like you're not going to be stepping into something that you want to be going backwards, obviously. You want to be stepping into something bigger and better. And all that takes is really that understanding, that openness to really see it for what it is. And that's part of the piece in the transition that is kind of the sticky wicket, right? Where women kind of get stuck in that. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, but where do I even begin? It's like, that's why we're here. We're here to help to kind of
Yeah.
go through that process together. But the other thing I was thinking too, as you were talking about that construct that we're all used to, I think, and this is my theory, but that the pandemic had a really, really important part in shaking up the status quo for what work is supposed to look like, for what success feels like, and how to attain success. And it's opened up a whole bunch of different avenues for people to do work and to serve at a higher level. And it's not to say, I mean, corporate work is wonderful. This is not about corporate being bad. Corporate work is, I mean, that was a construct that I was in for over 20 years of my life. There is a lot of goodness in the corporate world, but there are other elements and aspects out there that are just as rewarding and just as, they have the ability to kind of give you that empowerment as well. So I feel like that's something that really has shaped us a little bit over the past couple of years and has widened the scope a bit, which,
Yes.
pandemic was not a great thing, but that was one kind of good thing that came out of it, is that people can start to look and view their lives a little bit differently.
Yeah, and lots of new business models started. I know a ton of people that started their business during that time. So it did open up a lot of possibilities for everybody, basically.
Yeah.
Everybody at different stages of business, of career, everything. Everybody had to pivot a little bit. Even I'm thinking of my local environment, like all the stores or restaurants or places that served food inside, they suddenly
Yeah.
started to deliver food outside so that they wouldn't lose their revenue, right? And so a lot of businesses have had to be creative about how they serve their clients. And a lot of people
Yes.
at work who were suddenly still were like, why am I even working? Like, is this really what I want to do? Like, you get to ask yourself
Absolutely.
those questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I came from an environment, at Apple where we did not, you working from home. I mean, that was not, and I mean, a lot of environments were like that, right? Now it's like, wow, okay, so there's a lot that can be done within that framework. And we never
Okay.
would have thought about it because we never kind of wanted to allow that. And of course, now we know that there's a lot going on with trying to shift back from remote work, and that could be a challenge with organizations. But it's a whole different world out there, I think. And I think
Yes.
women are seeing that and recognizing, and especially if you've been in a career for a significant amount of time and you've got, 5 to 10 more years that you want to create something of your own, or you want to at least feel as though you have the agency to make that decision, whether or not you want to stay where you are or maybe move into something very different or something that is just more in alignment with who you are.
Yeah.
That's what women are doing.
Yeah, and I think because also we live so long right now that we can have several
Yes.
lifetimes within one lifetime. Like it's hard to stay interested in just one role for a very long period of time. Like we are curious, we're creative and highly intelligent, and so we need that stimulation and that fulfillment. So it makes sense.
Yes, it does. It's an exciting time. I look at this as a very
Yes.
exciting time.
So I would love to point my listeners in the direction of where they can find you. So first of all, let's talk about your reset program, and then we'll go into the different ways to connect with you.
So the reset program is the first cohort is starting in June, and then there's going to be another cohort probably July, August timeframe. And the purpose of the program is really to provide women with that space, either if they're contemplating leaving an environment that is no longer aligned with who they are and what they're looking to do, or have left and are looking for that support and guidance. What we talked a little bit about is that sort of in between space when people are just leaving one construct and moving into another. I firmly believe and have experienced this in my own life that women often ignore that part and kind of move into the next phase very quickly, thinking that that's just going to kind of evolve. And the purpose of the program is really to give women that ability to pause, to reconnect with what's important to them, to have support from other women that are going through the same thing, and to really have kind of that launching point to then move into what they decide they want to do next. And it's an 8-week program, so it's a pretty short period of time, and the cohorts are going to be small. So they're probably 4 to 6 max. I don't usually like to do more than 6 because I feel like it's just more meaningful exchange when you have
Yes.
that size. And also we do a lot of introspective work, and we do some reflection work and exercises around what comes next. And that just really, it deserves more time and space for that. That's the program. And what's been interesting about Beyond is that I've wanted to create more of an ecosystem for women. So the Reset program is really about the transition. In the fall, we're going to be launching what's called the Launch Lab, which is going to be more about the tactical business building exercises that women go through and being able to provide them with professional speakers coming in, talking about different ways that they can become more visible, building a brand, crafting messaging, all of the things that go into building a business. But I really wanted to make Reset and the lab separate because I feel like the Reset piece is really important to then make the other one more just as more
Yes.
impactful and meaningful. So that's going to be happening in the fall. But all of the programs that I offer, and there will be some master classes here and there if people want to just kind of dip their toe in the water and see what it's all about, because I do love to talk about the quiet breakup, because I think it's something that really, for women in general, for us to just know what's happening around us, whether you're a part of that or not, it doesn't matter. This is a really meaningful time in our history, I think. But also to talk a little bit about how to go through that process if it's something that you're looking into or that you're feeling internally. So those are all available on my website. Those will all be up, and you can certainly check out the links and connect with me at any time. I love to talk to women about this time in life and this space that they're in, even if it's just in the contemplation phase.
So we'll definitely link all of this in the show notes for anybody listening. You can grab them right there. And also wanted to make sure that we mention your podcast so that people can get to know you a little bit better, because the premise of your podcast is very interesting. It is about the uncomfortable part of change, right?
Absolutely. And the change effect being sort of that ripple effect. So we really explore women, how women can kind of gain that confidence and clarity around change by listening to other women's stories. So we have interviews with women, and then interspersed in that are just topics around change and the ripple effects that can happen once you make a shift in your life, and then how that can have that effect on all the other things. It's been a wonderful process to meet the women that I meet on this podcast, and it's really inspiring. It's a really inspiring podcast, and it's been really fun to do. So I hope people will join and listen in.
Well, it's been lovely having you here today and learning from you. And I can't wait to hear the news from your cohorts. We will have to check in down the line. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you for having me on. This has been a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to LinkedIn for Entrepreneurs. If you found this episode helpful, please share it on LinkedIn or on your favorite social media platform. And if you really want to make my day, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more business owners find this show. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.